Welcome to Reddit on Reddit by Half Pressed, a collection of stories of petty revenge. My sister-in-law didn't want to follow my house rules, so I let her follow mine the hard way. My sister-in-law moved in with us temporarily after she and her boyfriend had a huge fight, and she stormed out of their condo. She said she just needed a few days to cool off, and that turned into 2 weeks real quick. Before she settled in, I told her up front simple rules. Clean up after yourself, no blasting music past 10, and absolutely no smoking inside, since she's a smoker. She nodded. Of course, I totally get it. Promise. Fast forward a week. The house reeked of cigarette smoke, there were dishes piling up, and her Bluetooth speaker was going off like we were in a club. I reminded her nicely at first. She just laughed and said, "You're starting to sound like your mom." And I was like, okay. So the next day, I changed the Wi-Fi password, locked the laundry room, and hid the spare keys to the front gate. When she asked why nothing was working, I told her with a straight face, "Oh, I figured you don't follow the house rules, so you must not need the house privileges either." She sulked for 2 days, and then finally cleaned the kitchen and asked for the password back. I made her say, "I will follow the Queen's rules in the Queen's castle." She muttered it like a kid being forced to apologize, but hey, words are words. I handed her the Wi-Fi password like I was granting royal pardon. Guess who's been behaving ever since? A regular kept spoiling a show I was watching. I used to work in a comic shop, and we had a lot of regulars who would come in every week who I got to know fairly well. There was one guy who had mentioned he liked Stargate. So, one week he came in and I mentioned to him that I'd started rewatching Stargate from the very beginning. I also mentioned that I'd never seen the last 3 seasons or any of the spin-offs, so I was excited to see them. The first thing he says is, "Oh, so you don't know about detailed description of something that happens in the final season?" ? I was like, whoa, no spoilers! Which should have been enough, but apparently it wasn't. Every week he'd come back in and spoil it for me even more. And every week I would tell him to please not spoil it for me. This went on for about 2 months. Between the regularity of it and the smirk that he'd get on his face every time I asked him not to tell me spoilers, I knew he was doing it on purpose. So, one week, he came in and got a big pile of comics that he'd ordered. I waited for him to pay, and then, instead of bagging them up, I fanned them all out on the counter. You see, I read a lot of comics. Especially back then. I read every new comic that was published by Marvel and DC and then some as they came out. So it just so happened that I had read every comic that he had just purchased. I proceeded to point to each comic and spoil every single one. He didn't talk to me about Stargate after that. Boss lied about withholding tax money from my check and kept it for himself. So, I have other people mess with him. When I was in college, I worked part-time for this guy. Maybe, 8 hours per week. He paid me cash, which was fine because it was just spending money. When I started working for him full-time, I asked him to make me an official employee. I didn't want the government to begin wondering where my income was coming from or, why they weren't getting a cut. I didn't want any trouble. He began giving me pay stubs, but continued to pay me cash. One day I noticed the year-to-date amount of taxes withheld didn't add up. Turns out he was keeping that money for himself and causing both of us to commit tax fraud. I quietly quit without him finding out what I knew. I didn't want to get us both in trouble because I had accepted untaxed cash payments in the past. Now, his cell phone number is attached to his business. It's on all his business cards, all his clients have it, etc. Needless to say, he can't just change his phone number without it hurting his business, which is where I decided to have a little fun. It turns out you can buy pre-cut keys in bulk fairly cheap. Key fobs aren't expensive either. So I bought 80 keys and key fobs, and I wrote his number on all of them. Over a period of months, I began leaving the keys in different places. Strangers would find them and call to try to return them. If I was out late at a bar, I would tell the story. And inevitably, several drunks would volunteer to call him at 3 a.m., claiming to have found his lost key. I got to listen to a few of these calls on speakerphone. He'd get pretty upset about it, especially the late-night calls. Still, he couldn't change his number because it would mean he'd lose business. And he couldn't report anyone who called because they were just trying to help a guy find his lost key. Accidental revenge. This happened to me a couple years ago. Ordered an Uber after a friend's 40th birthday party. I was standing out front of the bar where I'd ordered it to pick me up. Driver claimed he was there and couldn't see me. Driver then canceled, and I got charged a fee. I'm standing there fuming, and then the same Uber appeared right in front of me outside the bar 2 minutes later. I was pretty angry. I knocked on his window, but accidentally caught the bezel on my ring, and it shattered his passenger window. Dude looked at me like a possum caught in headlights, and I bolted down to another bar. I never heard anything back, and my Uber account was reactivated about an hour later. That guy wouldn't have been able to finish his shift that night. Road rage revenge. Today I was on the highway heading out to our summer place. 2-lane highway at 9 a.m., minimal traffic, all was good. As I'm passing a rig on the highway, some idiot starts riding my bumper. Like, almost in my back seat. I can see him flailing his arms and yelling. My cruise control is set at 120 kilometers an hour, so it's not like I'm going slow. As he was passing the rig, he makes a dangerous swerve right in front of the truck and passes me on the inside lane, gives me the middle finger, and starts brake checking me, being a total ass. But the idiot has his company's name and phone number in huge letters across his rear window. At this point, I'm pissed off, and I can be a petty asshole. So I called the number hoping I would get the guy driving the car. A man answered, and I asked if it was him driving like a maniac on the highway. He said no, he was in town. Well, I told him what the clown with his company name was doing on the highway, and the gentleman thanked me and said he'd deal with it. Because the arsehole is still ahead of me, I see him answer his phone, followed by a lot of hand-waving. He then pulled into the right lane and slowed right down. As I passed him, I was laughing my ass off, because it looked like the boss was tearing a strip off him. Let that be a lesson to everyone. I may look old, but I don't mind taking the time to ruin someone's day. Rant complete. Thanks for listening.